Hi and welcome to Sacred Spaces. Today we're going to explore a hidden gem right in the centre of our city. This is the Latrobe Reading Room in the State Library, and it's the sacred space of our Planning Minister, Justin Madden. Let's explore it with him. We're here with the Planning Minister, Justin Madden, in the Latrobe Reading Room at the State Library. Minister, why have you picked this space as your sacred space?
Well, it's probably one of the great spaces, in a sense, not just great buildings, but it is a huge space and a brilliant space at that. And also, I've got a close connection to it. I studied here when I was studying architecture, so I feel a great affinity to it. But I think it's just one of the most beautiful interiors of any of the buildings in Melbourne because of the scale, the size, and almost the sort of seriousness and the earnestness that the space presents itself means that if you hear, it's not one of those libraries that you whisper in or that you, I suppose, that you muck around in. If you're a student, if you're here, you feel that it's a very serious place and you need to do some very serious research or study. So that's probably a good thing for all those tertiary students that might use it from RMIT across the road.
Do you remember your reaction when you first came into this space?
Well, I got glimpses of the building as a child because it was used as part of the Melbourne Museum until it was located up there near the exhibition buildings. So this space had an earnestness about it anyway as a child when you visited some of the exhibition rooms for the museum. I think it was only when I was a serious tertiary student that I came here to study, and again it was reinforced at the time that this was a place of very serious, very considered and rigorous study. And whilst it's a space that is brilliant now, it's only in recent years that the dome, which is glass, was uncovered. It was basically a copper dome for many years, so it was a very dark place. But that was quite handy if you were studying because you located yourself at one of the study areas, the green lamp. It was very individual, and that you head down and your backside up, and you had to get some study or research done. So I have good and fond memories of this place because it's such a beautiful location to study, and also that it's the building implores you to study, which was, as a tertiary student, probably a good thing because there's always a lot of distractions when you're a tertiary student too to
Yes.
do other things.
So you were forced into it.
Yeah, well, it just reminded you how, in a sense, how profound study could be and how important it was, and I think that's probably a handy thing because particularly at RMIT or as a tertiary student, and I was playing football at the time, there were a lot of distractions or potential distractions, but to have a space that implores you to confront your studies rather than delay them or I suppose put them to one side, it was a great reminder that you needed to get some work done, some serious work done, and be serious about it too.
Now, as an architect, are there specific features of this space that you have a particular fondness for, or is it the entirety?
Well, I think the fact that the dome is just so big, and I understand at the time this was probably quite a technical feat. From the little I know about the technical delivery of this building, that it was the largest concrete dome of its type in the world. So obviously it was a feat of engineering when it was built early last century. It was quite a very significant project in an engineering sense, let alone in an architectural sense. And in many ways that reflects, whilst it looks like an old building now in a sense, in its time, in its day, it was at the forefront of not only academia, of study, all those things that you'd expect of a library. It was also at the forefront of sort of technology and innovation in its building technique. So again, it means that Melbourne whilst we sometimes think of Melbourne today as a city of innovation today, it has always had those innovative characteristics as part of its history, and we see that reflected today in the way the city operates. And the other really impressive thing about the whole institute here, the library, was it was established by Redmond Barry, and the history of Redmond Barry as an individual in the context of Melbourne's history is quite an impressive story, and he was one of the leaders of the colony in terms of its institutions, its organisations. He was a judge, so a real leader. Not necessarily, he wasn't a politician, he was a leader on many fronts to establish a number of institutions that we now regard as part and parcel of Melbourne and Victoria. But in its day, it was obviously no easy feat to establish those in a new colony.
Just going back a little bit, what actually inspired you to study architecture? Because you'd come from a career in football, and what was it that drew you to architecture?
Well, I grew up in one of those outer suburbs. I grew up in Airport West as a kid, and there was a lot of building going on, and there probably needed to be more building because we didn't necessarily have a lot of infrastructure or services at the time, but whenever a building was built, it was a big thing, it was a big deal, and it meant a lot to people around them. And I suppose that translated into my interest of building and architecture in particular, that there was a lot of meaning in building. It wasn't just the fact that you had something over your head, that whether it was your house, whether it was your school, there was more meaning to it than just what it provided or serviced. It was a symbolism of great hope, and that's probably where my interest came from. And also, in a sense, the need to produce something. I felt that the great thing about architecture and the building industry is it actually produces things. There's a lot of areas of study or consideration or knowledge that it's great in theory, but you've got to put it into practice, and architecture is one of those great disciplines that allows you to work on all the theory, but then have to put it into practice, and the net result proves whether the theory's right or not. And so that was the great attraction of architecture.
If you were talking to someone who'd never been into the State Library, never seen this reading room, what would you tell them? What would you say to them about this space that makes it special?
Well, I think the fact that obviously our forefathers had a great commitment to knowledge and understanding, and reflected in just the scale of this reading room. It's not just a single, if you look across the space, it's not a volume which is just about the floor plate, it's about the airspace as well, and it covers, you know, the equivalent of 3 or 4 stories just in this space alone. So I'm not sure exactly what that says, but it does say that this is important. And maybe the fact that there's a lot of light at the top of the dome also reflects the connection between aspiration, knowledge, and I suppose the universe and light. But then I'm sounding a bit theoretical there. But I think all the symbolism that goes with that is a great reflection on the way in which our forefathers thought about and planned the city. And it's important that we continue that level of commitment to the future, and not just see ourselves as a city of today, but a city of today and tomorrow, and our children and their children, and plan for that as well.
Minister, thank you so much. It's an amazing space that you've picked as your sacred space in Melbourne, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and it's great to know that it is a magnificent space and so well cared for too.